Since there was no live stream this weekend, I thought I'd go ahead and share a video instead of the 400-gallon reef. The tank is now 10 years and 5 months old, and it definitely needs some attention by me. But be that as it may, life continues to find a way. If you look closely at this pajama cardinal fish, you will notice that it has something in its mouth. It's actually holding a cluster of eggs. Now, this isn't the first time I've seen this. They are mouth brooders, but I've never bred any fish, and I am not prepared to do so at this time either. So eventually this will become reef food, but still it's kind of cool to see it in the aquarium. And no, I don't feel guilty. The tank itself is kind of going through a period of, I don't know if I want to call it neglect, but I definitely haven't been interacting with it very much because I have been super busy. So it just kind of runs on autopilot. That still requires me to check things and make sure everything's working right. And even this week, I had to take care of specific tasks to make sure that everything was up to snuff. So I refilled all the Trident reagents, I calibrated the Trident, I cleaned the protein skimmer. I tried to solve a problem with one of the pumps that's been making some grinding noises, but it's sporadic. I went ahead and I cleaned the algae turf scrubber. I completely cleaned the calcium reactor and refilled it with rinsed media and then put in fresh media on top, because what had happened was I topped it off several times over the past year and the base of the reactor is just filled with what looked like sludge. Now that it was all clean, I went ahead and I turned on the Versa pump to go ahead and start refilling it, which took forever. I feel like it took 20-30 minutes until it filled up water to the very top of the reactor. So while I was waiting, I had not plugged in the Mag 7 recirculation pump. I did, however, put it back into the power center where all the electronics are, but I didn't physically plug it in. And that is where I made a mistake, because then I'd say about, well, a little while later, I saw the reactor was finally full, and I went and turned on the circulation pump switch and went about my life. But then later on, I noticed that the tank's alkalinity was not coming up like I expected it to. Now, it took me pretty much a solid day or so to notice that, maybe a day and a half. And the tank was measuring somewhere around 6.6 alkalinity, which is really low for a tank that normally is at 9. And I thought, well, that can't be right. Let me calibrate the Trident. So I calibrated it. And then when I was all done, I thought, well, let me go ahead and test the water with my ELOS test kit at the same time, which kind of measured that 6.6 to 7. I was like, wow, it really is that low. The Trident was correct. So then I looked at the calcium reactor again. I looked at the effluent. I looked at the CO2 gauges to make sure there was plenty of pressure. I looked at everything. And I still couldn't figure out why it wasn't right. So then I measured the effluent coming out of the reactor. Now the effluent is a steady trickle, and it's very important for my reef. That's how I've run it for 20 years. But it should be measuring somewhere between 19 and 35 DKH. And it was coming out at 15. I thought, that's really strange. Why is this acting like this? So then I got down on my hands and knees and really looked closely at the reactor, because there's a plastic disc at the top that should be spinning when the reactor is running. And it wasn't spinning. And then I thought, that's strange. I mean, I turned it on and I went to look at the switch and the switch was turned on. And it was only then that I realized, yeah, the switch is turned on, but I never physically plugged it into the back of the switch because I was waiting for the reactor to fill up with water, when what I should have done was plugged it into the switch. Can you imagine? You have a heater, you've set everything correctly, but it's not plugged in. That's basically my dumb mistake of the week. And so I've lost a little bit of coral this week because the alkalinity dropped so hard. Wasn't a major change, but you can definitely see some white here and there. And that is just the nature of being a reef keeper. Sometimes you make a mistake, a blunder, and you lose a little bit of livestock because of it. I hate that. I really do. So once I got it plugged in, I went ahead and I made sure that the circulation was happening, which it was. I also, by the way, didn't mention, I checked the pH controller as well. I mean, literally, I looked at everything except for the power plug, which is kind of crazy, but it is what it is. Then I went ahead and I dosed soda ash to the tank to bring my alkalinity back up where it belonged. And it took about 3 tablespoons to get me somewhere around 8 DKH. And then I went ahead and just let the calcium reactor continue to do its job. And at this point, I'm right about at 9 DKH. So I'm right back on target where I want it to be. And I'm happy about that. Another thing that I cleaned up was the reactor that holds the carbon. So that's nice. And the Waste collector has been emptied out completely, so it's ready for the new week. You can see the other side of the sump is pretty packed with stuff. There's the calcium reactor in the background. The Versa pump had new tubing put on it. The Abyss pump and the Vectra L2 that you can't quite see to the left, they both need to be taken apart and cleaned. That is going to be on my upcoming maintenance this month. There is the algae turf scrubber that I have to reach into and clean out from time to time. The refugium's actually doing a lot better than it was. I was really low on some trace elements, and I had to go ahead and beef those up. So dosing iron was part of it, and then I also dosed some Reef Blueprint MT, which is made for the algae turf scrubbers. And that has helped bring this Caulerpa back to life. I was actually thinking after all these years I might actually lose some macroalgae, but instead it's been holding well. At the time of recording this, the top-off reservoir is being refilled. A lot of people call those the ATO when really it's the top-off reservoir, or TOR. So here is just some close-ups of my hammer coral. I've had this colony growing from the original piece I got 20 years ago. It is doing quite well except for all of the anemones on the backside stinging it, which means I have to go in there and remove a bunch of them. The sea bay has moved up against the Blue Ridge coral, which isn't great for the Blue Ridge, but it does make it more visible to be seen from the front of the tank. And then my copper band is always out and about and loves to get its picture taken. Was trying to interfere with my filming of this Duncan coral that I've had for probably about 5, 6, 7 years. You can see some skunk clownfish and the coal tang. Everything's doing quite well. Also, a couple of years ago, I got this mandarin from Live Aquaria, and it looked super starved. I dropped in the tank, and I said, well, you got 400 pounds of live rock to pick. Good luck. And now you can see this fish as a fat, plump. It's really small, but I'm super close, so it looks ginormous in this video. It actually looks really, really good, and I'm very happy when I get to see this come out and about. It's a lovely specimen, and I'd like to get a blue one as well. Every night, pretty much consistently, I seem to be racing the clock to feed the fish at 11 p.m. I don't know why I pick so late to do it, but the fish are completely used to it. And the problem is the lights are about to kick off, and I'm always trying to add a few more minutes just to get the food in the tank before it goes dark. As we wrap up this video, I want to go ahead and talk about things we don't see very often. In the case here, the flame scallop is something that I only get to see depending on its location. And this one day, it was actually really actively moving about. So if you watch closely as I'm talking about other things, you will see how it moves besides jet propulsion. It actually has a foot that will be coming out on the far right. And I'm just going to keep letting this go as I talk about some other things. But I do want to mention the flame scallop is typically not a great choice for a reef tank because our water is too clean and these need to be fed constantly. The scallop is a filter feeder, so it's working on things like phytoplankton. It's using the food I use from Reef, the powder that I mix up in water, let it sit for 5 minutes, and then I pour it in the tank. And every single time I put that type of food in the tank, I turn off the Seche Shark Pro so it doesn't trap anything in its sponges or remove anything via the carbon. If I'm doing it late at night, I don't even want the UV running. I want to make sure that corals, like the gorgonians in the background, as well as this clam, can get a good meal. So just keep watching. You're going to see that foot start to emerge on the far right. I also want to mention that the other day I was looking in my reef and I thought, oh, I totally forgot about the tiger cowrie. I haven't seen that in forever. Now, the tiger cowrie is pretty big. I'd say it's about the size, well, it's bigger than a lime, a little bit smaller than a lemon, and it was on the bottom of the tank, just sitting there, completely shiny, no meat extended, no skin. I thought, wow, I guess something ate it. And then 20 minutes later, I looked at it, and you could see that it was covering its mantle over the shell again. I thought, oh, it's alive. And then an hour later, it had moved into a different spot that was impossible to see. So I actually have some really cool creatures that I don't get to see very often because they are so, what should we say, shy, reclusive, hidden, or the tank is just so darn full you can't find anything. So take a look at this clam. I don't know if you've noticed this, the scallop. The foot did start to emerge, and it's going to, there it is. Okay, so what it's gonna do, I'm just gonna give you a heads up, it's gonna reach up and grab onto the rock, and then it's gonna pull itself upward. And that's how it holds itself in place until it could add some byssal threads to secure its location permanently, so it doesn't have to use that foot all the time like some kind of super strong arm. Okay, lastly, this week I did my ICP testing. I hadn't done that in 120 days. And overall, the tank was pretty much where I expected it to be. I'm low on potassium, so I need to dose that. That's measuring at 378. I'd rather it be around 430 ppm. I'm also low on manganese, vanadium, lithium, weird, iron, and barium. So I need to dose more iron to the tank, which I knew because the algae wasn't growing so well in the refugium. Salinity measured at 34.5, calcium was at 433, magnesium was at 1482, my phosphates were up at 0.6, my nitrates right now are somewhere hovering around 50, so obviously more cleaning, more maintenance, and then more trimming in the tank to improve flow in the aquarium itself. These are the things I have to worry about. My strontium level is right at 9.0. Usually it's at 8, so it's up a little bit higher, but that's okay. And my iodine level is okay at 0.08. Previously it was at, it went down a little bit. I can't figure out. Oh yeah, it was at 0.1. So I need to dose iodine as well. And that's something I do with Prodibio. So my tank is, overall the chemistry is not far off. Lighting's not far off. Equipment-wise is going well. And because of all these things in place and being automated to some degree, the tank can live on in spite of me. And that is something that I've said for many, many years. But I do need to get in there and clean out some of the dead that you saw earlier in the video. There's some areas where I lost some shadow caster, which is kind of a bummer. But I still have several branches with life, and if I trim it all down, they can regrow and hopefully turn into another pretty colony one day. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you aren't a subscriber to this channel, please do subscribe. Every single Saturday, I have a live stream that goes on for about an hour, hour and a half, possibly 2 hours, where I have a topic, and then I do a question and answer period for anyone that wants to participate. And then lastly, as always, I encourage everyone to subscribe to and read Coral Magazine. That is something that I'm an active part in. I'm the executive editor, and because of it, I promote it to you guys regularly on this channel. Thank you for watching. Bye, guys.